Ladies and gentlemen, can you take your seats, please? Okay. Good evening, members of the board and executive of IBW, strategic partners, sponsors, members of the media and other specially invited guests, our online guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to offer you a special welcome to our annual public discussion forum. I would just first like to say I'm Julia Hope-Taggart. I'm the first VP of IBW and also had the honour this year of chairing the steering committee for International Business Week. I'd first like to say, wow, what a lovely audience we have here today. It's a great looking audience, probably the greatest we've ever had in the words of the US president. It's absolutely true, not fake news. But also, wow, it is really hot in here, and they are looking into trying to get the temperature down a little bit. So keep fanning yourselves and get comfortable, okay? So this year's discussion is going to be framed around the topic of thriving in crisis. Tonight's forum offers an opportunity to really examine how small and medium enterprises can thrive in difficult economic times. As usual, we have sought to have a variety of perspectives from which this topic can be approached. And therefore, we're pleased to have with us Khalil Bryan, Tom Hall, and Jeremy Stephen to give us that wonderful perspective and bring their experiences to bear on the discussion. We're also extremely fortunate, and I'm thrilled to have Lisa Cummings here, who is the Executive Director of UE Consulting. Lisa will be moderating tonight's event, and we expect to hear her round out the views and bring her perspective gleaned from the other side of the table. As I look out on the audience tonight, it is lovely to see the familiar faces that we're used to seeing from the international business sector, but it's also wonderful to see the unfamiliar faces in the audience. We do not host these forums for us just to sit and talk about international business, the people from the sector to continually talk about the business, and we really can do that very well and often do. But we actually want to hear from you. So this forum today we're expecting to hear dynamic exchanges of opinions and views and comments. This is the way that we learn about the sector, and we get to inspire and educate and encourage you as well. I can also see a cross-section of students from UE in the audience, which is fantastic because you are the future of international business in Barbados. And while, as Barbadians, we may take secret pride in the tongue-in-cheek saying that you can find a Bajan anywhere you go in the world, the flip side of that is the inevitable and potential brain drain. So the message that we like to send is that international business in Barbados provides ample opportunity for all Barbadians who are interested in the sector to engage fulfilling international careers. And those careers can be found right here on Bajan soil. Therefore, we continue to count UE as a very important strategic partner in the growth and development of our sector, as it provides the skilled resources much needed to drive this growth. Barbados has very limited natural resources, but we have a wealth of human resources, and we must utilize that capital to our best advantage. It's a natural fit for international business, and this week of activities has been designed to show the public just that. It's to show the public that when we support international business, we're supporting the 4,000 plus employees employed in that sector here on Bajan soil. Those employees are using their earnings to sustain their families at this difficult economic time. So we continue to share that message over and over, and you'll hear it throughout the week, and you'll probably hear it tonight and during the refreshments as well. And we hope that you also will join us in then spreading that really important word. Before I go, I want to thank our sponsor, Brookfield International Bank. With each year, the financial challenge of hosting the weeks-long activities becomes more acute. So we celebrate you for the commitment that you have shown again to recognizing and supporting the importance of highlighting the opportunities that international business brings. And with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Greg McConney, who is past president of BIBA and also the sponsor, to say a few words before passing the baton to Ms. Cummings to commence proceedings. Greg.
Thank you, Julie. President, Executive Committee, Directors of BIBA, Moderator and panelists, live streaming viewers, ladies and gentlemen. Brookfield is pleased to be a sponsor of this event, which seeks to highlight the various aspects of the international business sector and enhance the understanding of everyone in Barbados as to the importance of the sector to our economy. Brookfield is a Toronto-based, publicly traded global alternative asset manager with over 115 years of experience in owning and operating real assets in the real estate, infrastructure, renewable energy, and private equity spaces. We have over 250 billion US dollars in assets under management and operate in over 30 countries across the globe and have over 70,000 operating employees. Brookfield has had a presence in Barbados for 30 years and currently employs 36 people, all of whom are Barbadian or other CARICOM nationals. Our staff complement has doubled here over the last 5 years, and we're optimistic that we can continue to grow our operations here in the years to come. I am personally looking forward to hearing the discussions from our panel on the topic, Thriving in Crisis. It is a theme that's certainly consistent with Brookfield's contrarian view to investment. Our experience shows that the best investment opportunities are often found in regions or sectors undergoing periods of financial or operational challenge. It is at times of crisis that we also have the greatest opportunity to make fundamental changes to the way that we perceive ourselves and to act on that changed perception. I remain hopeful that in the ongoing development of Barbados's Sustainable Recovery Plan 2017, that the social partners, our government, our unions, our private sector, and Barbadians as a whole will be able to truly work collaboratively together to change the landscape for economic and social activity, to change it to one where integrity, transparency, and accountability become the hallmarks by which all of our economic and social interactions are conducted. It won't be an easy road, but it's a critical one to take in order to restore investor confidence and turn around our country's economic fortunes. But enough about that. Let us hear from our panelists about thriving in a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I think they were some very inspiring words, which will hopefully get the panelists ready for their discussion. So with that said, it's now my pleasure to invite our moderator, Ms. Lisa Cummings, to introduce you to our distinguished panelists. And I look forward to enjoying this evening's discussion and engaging with many of you after the discussion at the refreshments. So over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much also, Greg, for sponsoring this event. And it is my pleasure this evening to be your moderator for this discussion. I am sharing the stage with three outstanding Barbadian professionals, well, two were outstanding Barbadian professionals and one representing a flagship Barbadian institution in Williams Industries. I want to introduce first and foremost to my right, Mr. Jeremy Stevens, who is no stranger to anyone in this room, I don't think. Jeremy has become one of the foremost voices on economic development matters in Barbados and across the region, and he is the current president of the Barbados Economic Society. He has a range of experience, and so those include things like private equity and general economic consulting, but specifically he has produced some interesting work that we are going to be talking about in his most recent publication on cryptocurrencies and its possibility of being included in the international reserves held by the government of Barbados. So welcome, Jeremy. Please join me in welcoming him. And we have Tom Hall, who I was very pleased to meet for the first time in person tonight. We've been talking virtually, and he has a wicked sense of humor, so I'm looking forward to hearing from him in his witty way of expressing himself this evening. Tom is representing the Williams Industries Inc. this evening. He has worked on the derivatives trading floor of UBS Investment Bank in London. He spent about 7 years there. And then he has worked also for young companies and started up his own. So he is in good company with our next panelist, Mr. Khalil Bryan. We'll welcome them together. Khalil is a Barbadian entrepreneur. I'm sure many of you have heard of his most popular startup, although I know that there are many other things that Khalil is also doing that may not be as well known, but he has started something called Beep Cab. I'm very fascinated by the Beep Cab concept, and he's participated in a number of activities all across the region. He has an MBA from the Richard Ivey School of Business in the University of Western Ontario, and he's also an engineer, specifically in computer engineering. So he's been able to combine those processing skills with logical thought and to pull those things into his entrepreneurial ventures. So welcome, Tom. Welcome, Khalil. So tonight we're going to have a discussion. We're going to get into the meat of the matter. When we started discussing this over the last couple of days, and obviously the Barbados International Business Association has done an exceptional job. Congratulations to all of you, Mr. President, and all of those who are in the executive committee. This has become very much a flagship event, International Business Week in the calendar for Barbados, and of course the outstanding work which is done by the Secretariat led by Henderson Holmes is well known to almost everyone. So we're very appreciative of them for organizing this event, and so we hope that we can do them justice with the substance of our presentations here this evening. So we're going to start by looking at the contextual basis for this discussion. When we talk about thriving in crisis, and we talk about the macroeconomic fundamentals of Barbados and what constitutes a crisis, and how you contextualize an international business sector within that broad framework, you know, what is required of us? We're going to start first and foremost with Jeremy, and he's going to give us a little bit of context, and then we're going to move into the specifics from there, and I think we're going to have a very robust discussion. But let's just put it in context first from Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Good night to one and all. Good night, and thanks for coming out. It almost feels like if I'm going to be spinning top in mud, because you've got in this room tonight several commentators who would have actually touched the same issues. You've got Dr. Ron Yearwood over there, Dwayne Burke, Colin Daniel, Busy. You've got a lot of people who would have been commenting at length, even Charles there, smiling very sheepishly over there in the corner, that would have commented at length and interfaced with the people in power and others to really draw some attention to the issues. But for those of you who somehow, including my students who might test on this stuff, right? The context is very simple. For a number of years, let's go back to 2008, and I'm not trying to be political at this point, but really that was the turning point. Internationally, you would have had a great recession. Some of us in the field would call it a depression. And whilst most of the world, including cases like Iceland and whatnot, would have moved on, made some drastic changes to how they wanted to recover. I don't know how many of you know about it, but Iceland was on the brink of a disaster of epic proportions and made some very radical decisions to change. So you had a number of countries in Asia, in Europe, and elsewhere that would have changed. But in Barbados, there was, I don't want to call it a reluctance to change, but you know, a duck is a duck. And unfortunately, that reluctance to change would have actually been stymied further by the fact that it would have been tougher, perceivably, in 2012 thereabouts, for international business to thrive in such an environment, namely because the butter and bread of Canada would have basically signaled that it was time to open up all the goodies that it had before for Barbados. So you've got the issue with the fiscal deficit. We all know about public debt. We all know about the printing of money. We all know about the pressure that has caused on the currency. We all knew from the time you heard about the printing of money that essentially radical fiscal remedies would have to be put in place. So we're in a situation now because of being late with the right remedies, because as I've said very publicly, and I will say in this forum, the Minister of Finance, no offense to him, has always been right at the wrong time, right? No, I'm being very blunt about it, but it's just that the policies have been right, but they've been far too late. So with that in mind, you've reached a situation, just in closing, where drastic remedies will have to be taken on both the onshore side of the country and offshore side. Onshore side, we are seeing it right now with the effects of the NSRL on local businesses. I'm sure my colleagues can spit at length how that's really damaged them. Also, the issue of getting access to foreign exchange, which might not necessarily impact international businesses per se in the room, but it will have an impact in the perceivable future, particularly given the implied costs, and I will go out on a limb and say the devalue cost of the Barbados dollar, which is 2% higher than it was a couple months ago. It will impact on ancillary services that can be provided to the international business sector. The fact that the country has continued to be downgraded, and look out for one more before the year is out. Yes, you heard it today. They said it earlier this year that 2 would come. Another one would definitely come, just given the environment we are in. And what does that mean for investing in this country going forward? How would new international businesses view an opportunity to invest? Strong legislation can do only so much when the country's government, which is the stable on which the country is built, is operating under some extremely bad conditions. So the context is simple, and I'm sure we could explore a lot more of it tonight, but what really should be really explored is how these two gentlemen on their day-to-day business really see the challenges from their point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jeremy. But before we even get to Khalil and Tom, I have a follow-up question for you. So governments don't trade, businesses do. Governments don't move, businesses do. So what have been some of the important decisions that needed to be made at the level of the state that would have facilitated the environment for businesses to engage in either trade for the purposes of products moving and investment in for the purpose of attracting capital into the domestic, into the productive sectors?
The beautiful thing about models, economic models, is that although many economists would prescribe them and not necessarily agree on the application, there's so many of them around that you can implement. So the answers are out there and have been out there for some time, and I will state emphatically in this room that they are known to those in power. Let's not think for a moment that they do not know how to solve the problem. The issue has always been who is the master, which master you're serving. And without going further into that, some of the easy recommendations that could have been implemented, let's go back to 2012, something as controversial as basically rescheduling your debt. I remember having a conversation with the Minister of Finance in Cabinet, so I'm kind of breaking the law right now by saying this, but no, kind of, not really. But basically, because it's parliamentary privilege and that stuff, I know, right? But some would believe so. Funny. But no, on a serious note, so essentially, the conversation back in 2012, 2013 was about how could you stop the backsliding? You could have, as I said, because I was one of the people that worked on that UAE proposal, I kind of fed it to Dr. Eswick. So there was looking for new sources of finance, looking into new markets, because as these gentlemen will tell you, it's all about assessing opportunities wherever it lies. or less. Furthermore, the rescheduling of debt would have really bought us some space. The pushback in cabinet was that it would have caused downgrades, believe it or not. Believe it. But it was as clear as day that if you couldn't deal with the expenditure issues, and of course there's a political issue if you continue to cut expenditure too rapidly. Of course, they have to balance the politics with the actual economics, unfortunately and possibly. But given that they had to balance that, it was clear as day that with the cutback in international business was the largest contributor to corporate tax revenue, and as a single source was even more vital to government taxation than even tourism. All right, it is a very vital industry. So with that being cut back, that being under threat, the government would have had to find new sources of revenue that would have dragged down the economy. So you had to find ways and means, A, to either grow, or B, find alternative means of financing to buy yourself some cover. Interest rates were historically low back in 2012, 2013. It would have, by now, we would have been recovering, to be honest, on the debt profile side. By now, despite how people feel. So, I mean, there are many other things we could talk about, but with the particular interests of those in the room right now, those I think would have been
Let's
more
talk a little bit
interesting.
about currency. Because we're going to go to Tom immediately afterwards, and I want you to talk a little bit about the question of devaluation and
She
currency.
tried to set me up, you know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead. So what do you want me to talk about with
So
currency?
in our preparatory sessions, and we're going to talk a little bit about that immediately after you responded to my question,
Yeah.
putting you on the spot, Jeremy.
That's fine.
How has the narrative, the public narrative around the question of maintaining the currency peg, decreasing foreign exchange reserves, those kinds of things, impacted on the international business sector in terms of businesses finding that capital that you've been talking about?
Well, all right. So students, I want you to see, right, this is why I put you on the spot. So when something like this happens, you ready. You get me? So, all right. The impact of this great institution printing money, as we all know, leads to an increase in aggregate demand that is not backed up by any relative means of production. It means that you have to continue borrowing, which means you're creating money out of thin air, essentially, without going through more of the technicalities behind it. What does this mean? It means then that government's ability to continue financing activity in the future becomes more difficult. It also then means that the government, well, through the central bank, I should say, the monetary authorities are creating something essentially more worthless as time goes on. That also then means that in the future, it will be challenging for the government to not just service external debt, but more importantly, internal debt. The majority of commercial banks in this country, from the T-bills alone, the T-bill rates I'm seeing alone being so high, proving to me that at this time that is the thinking. So from an investment point of view, it means that someone who's coming here to contribute FDI is looking to see if the country has any future productive possibilities. And if it is that government continues to be a drag on the economy because it set itself up to drag, because probably it hasn't opened up or hasn't improved its ease of doing business with them, because it hasn't opened up the tax treaty network. That needs to be done. I'm surprised we aren't with Indonesia like right now. That's a save. And Papua New Guinea, and most of Eastern Africa, to be honest. But yeah, but I mean even further than that, right? I would be surprised. Congo should be good as well too. But what I'm saying is that the future possibilities can be dragged down by a government that continues to be too big because of political will or lack thereof. In other words, I need to stay big because it ensures that I get back into office. Right, Berkey? We know how we feel about that. But the point being is that artificially you're too big as the economy is getting smaller. It means then the investment potential in said country, even if your double taxation treaties are sound, makes you worth less to the investor. Essentially, it's a hard thing to realize or to actualize, but it's the truth. So all of this pressure can mean eventually that the central bank has to devalue the currency. In fact, it's really the central bank's call if the dollar devalues. And there are a couple of mechanisms that you should look out for. Simply, if the commercial banks really start playing hardball with buying government paper, or more importantly, leaving money at the central bank. It's a liberalized environment. Very easy conditions to get a devaluation right now. All you have to do is put enough pressure on the central bank. So if moral suasion fails, all of this unravels. I'm not trying to say that it should happen. So in closing, particularly, yes, devaluation does have, in the immediate term, a very negative impact on investing locally, especially if you are an offshore or international business. Let me get my language correct. But yeah, remember last year we had this issue too, right, Connie? But in the future, it could, especially if you're trading in Barbados dollars. Let's say you're setting up here to do business of Mount Caricon. It could result in increased revenues, but the problem is, when do you invest, and are you willing to withstand the adjustment period that you need to withstand?
So, for the benefit of our audience, what Jeremy has just described is what we call crisis. So we're moving on now to discuss how to thrive in the midst of what Jeremy has just described. We've contextualized it for that reason, because we're having that discussion. So Williams Industries is arguably one of the larger businesses in Barbados, and we know them as having had many companies under one group. And it will be interesting to hear what you have to say on what the experience of Williams Industries has been in the context of this crisis and this very challenging economic environment in Barbados.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so first to say that being in a crisis is a very bad place to be. You really want to be getting out of the crisis. You want to be making decisions to move yourself along from it. So far from striving in a crisis, what we try and do at Williams Industries, what I try and do with my work, is to realize I'm in a crisis, deliberate about what I'm going to do, and then make a decision. I'm here because of a crisis, actually. In 2014, I was trying to cook breakfast for my 4 children, which was a crisis in itself. And I got a WhatsApp in my pocket from the main boss man here, who's sitting 4 rows back, Busy Williams, and he was having a bad day. He was having a crisis. He was having a crisis about running the business. It's a hard business to run. There's 22 companies. I'm tired. These black eyes weren't here before I arrived. And he said, I've just got to find a CEO. This is too tough. He didn't say this is a crisis, so I WhatsApped back. The bacon was burning, so I just said, yeah, I'll do it, no problems. And then I got a reply saying, you serious? Anyway, so here I am, working with Busy, running Williams Industries. So thriving in a crisis is, as I said before, it's not easy. I just want to say that, just to go back to that earlier point, that what we do at Williams Industries is we try and make decisions very quickly. If you can do that, you've probably got good data behind you. You've probably got, we have at Williams Industries a requirement to have data from every single company in signed off form from our accountants by the 15th calendar day of the month. Without that data, we can't possibly sit down and discuss realistically the health of the business. So we have the data, we sit down. With the data, we can spot when things are going awry. Then you have to not deny there's a problem. It's a really human instinct to deny there's a problem. Okay? Then you have to get through the deliberation of what to do, and you have to make a decision. So I can't really say in any specific mantra of how to thrive in any crisis, but if you're not doing those things, you're going to really struggle.
So can you give us a little bit of insight? Jeremy raised a number of issues about the ability of businesses to attract investment capital. What has been the experience so far from the Williams Industries perspective?
We have a lot of interested parties wanting to work with us. Williams has a fantastic brand, has a rock-solid brand. There are many good companies in the group. BRC was my father was managing director of BRC Worldwide. That's why I'm here, really. Formed a 50-50 partnership with Busy Williams, and anyway, that's why I'm here. We have lots of really good companies in the group. So we do attract capital. One of the problems we see, and it's a major one, is that international money, well, capital is rational, in my opinion. I'm so slightly right, I have to admit, I'm a right-wing economist. I feel that generally capital is rational. So if you have a currency that is illiquid, then, and you are in a space in the world where there are similar similar economies, if your currency becomes very illiquid like ours is now, you're going to, ceteris paribus, you're going to struggle to attract the same level of investment. So there was another crisis earlier today when I was having an argument with my boss about what to do about that problem. That's not my role. What I need to say is that if the discussion doesn't come up to the currency level, if we can't have a rational discussion about how to make a liquid currency, I believe that we have, well, I believe the EC dollar is 1-for-1 reserved against the US dollar, or a quantum like that. And here we are. I'm getting a lot of shakes, but I'll leave the economics to these guys. Anyway, I'll get back to track. Yes, we do attract capital. That capital is reluctant to come into Barbados at the moment. We still do attract it. We still do attract co-investment. And the same problem is on the way out. If we wish to invest with another entity in the Caribbean, we struggle. I mean, even Williams Industries struggles to get access to hard currency to go and expand our business. So it's a major risk, and with risk comes a reduction in demand for that investment.
So I want to talk for a moment, just a moment, about inward flows and outward flows of investment at the level of the firm. Because one of the models that we have seen in play across the Caribbean, across Barbados in particular, has been we have seen a limited number of Barbadian firms expanding beyond our borders and looking to invest in other domiciles. So we've seen inward flows of investment being constrained, but we've also seen outward flows of investment constrained. We've seen a few companies in Barbados, I think you can count them on one hand, who have expanded outward and who are now down into Central America, and their capital has moved and it's been repatriated out back home and those kinds of things. What is the perspective of Williams Industries on outward movement and perhaps setting up a commercial presence in other jurisdictions to expand the scope of your business?
Okay, so what we're trying to do at Williams Industries is protect and enhance the performance of our local companies. That is our core business. We have many of them firing pretty much on all cylinders at the moment. NSRL hasn't helped, etc. There's a lot to be done locally just to keep our companies going at the rate we feel they should be going. But having said there is risk in our currency, having said there is risk to this state, and we have the ability to grow outwards, we would be irrational not to do that. We are trying to do that. In the long run, that's where you get the medium to long run, which is the horizon that I look at. You're going to get monies coming back. That's how you grow your economy, by getting the monies coming back in dividends. So we are looking to do that, and we feel it's fundamental to the growth of this island. Williams Industries, you could take as a little subset of the whole economy. I mean, it's in utilities, it's in trading businesses, manufacturing, services. So as a shareholder of Williams Industries, I am only interested in the growth of Barbados as a state. So even if you don't agree with what I'm saying, that is what I'm constantly puzzling over, because it's so material now to the health of Williams Industries. So I don't say things to just for effect. It's what I think is going to grow my investment in Williams Industries, and that's how I act.
Thank you, Tom. Now, Khalil, you are in a different space altogether. You are in one of those very early stage, very sexy spaces that people are talking about a lot in Barbados, entrepreneurship. So you are in the startup space, and while many economies have already gone into this space many, many moons ago, Barbados is now entering. What has been your experience with BeepCab and with your other initiatives so far, operating in the middle of this environment? And I know access to capital has, of course, been a major challenge for your companies.
Hi, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I hope that you're having a wonderful evening. I'm loving hearing both of these guys up here. So thinking about the startup space, which is not a new concept, it's an area where almost every company has gone. There's an idea, you need some capital to be able to execute that idea. You have a couple people, hopefully you have a great team, and then you're able to then go out and execute that idea. When I was thinking of, what does it mean to thrive in a crisis? There are two types of crises, or there are two types of threats that start to cause a crisis. Those are the direct threats, so competition, that can cause specific problems for your business. And then, of course, there are the external, or rather the structural threats, which I think both Jeremy and Tom have outlined in terms of what policies are being put in place in the economy to, in our case, increase entrepreneurship, increase access to capital. It's really funny. People talk about, we're really doing a lot to help entrepreneurs, and then, of course, you go and say, hey, can we get access to capital? Well, and if you've shown that you've grown every year, and the conversation is still stopped, or it's still, it never really advances to the point that you actually get the money to be able to execute on what you need. So for the people that know me here, they know that I am a constant optimist. If a glass is half full, then I'm sure that there's a friend with another glass that's half full, and we can take those two glasses and we can fill them up and make a whole glass. That's really my outlook on how we need to execute. In Barbados, we have, and one of the examples that we all laugh about is the pothole situation. And I go, well, isn't that an opportunity for somebody to get a concrete mixer and go to people in the neighborhood and ask them if they'd pay for them to fill the potholes along a street that they care about? There are always opportunities, and there's always, in some way, a way to execute. And of course, there are almost always a group of people that are willing to pay. But what are we ultimately here to do as entrepreneurs, as business people? You're not here to provide and sell products, which sounds a little crazy. You're here to solve problems for people, and people pay you to solve their problems. The politicians, similarly, are here to help put policies in place so that companies can solve those problems, they can grow, they can employ people, and then, of course, the entire economy grows. That's essential. That's my take on it. It's a problem-solving gig. So in the entrepreneurship space, we have had to pivot our product, change some of the things that we do so that we can actually capture that value, because people do want to pay for something if you're solving their problem, and then to be able to then grow. So, and that sounds very abstract. So in a very concrete way, our company started with the goal of providing real-time information on buses. That's all we wanted to do. So then we needed a GPS tracking platform. So we searched the world high and low to find this GPS tracking platform. We finally found a company in Canada. We decided to become the reseller for their product. That GPS tracking platform, while we just wanted to be able to provide real-time information on buses, has become the primary source of revenue for our company. Because we realized that insurance companies need it, fleet managers need it, we need that private individuals need it because they have a number of vehicles that they want to see and see what they're doing, want to reduce their costs, and we are now able to give them a product that we had no idea ever existed. And if we, people always go, so the typical talk in the entrepreneurship space is, how long is your runway? Everybody's runway is between 6 months to 18 months. Our runway has been 1 month for the past 24 months. And we joke about that, but it's because you do create something that has a real business, real revenue stream, and you just never stop. In the moment where you think that you should stop, you never stop, and in the moments that you have to stop, you just keep on walking. So the thriving in a crisis, sometimes it's not thriving, sometimes it really is just managing. And then you get to a place where you can breathe, and you do see past, the next week, and then you're able to say, okay, what do I do? And what I love that Tom said is that they measure everything. We measure everything. We have data to back up decisions. Sometimes we do it by conjecture, but that's based on experience. And then, of course, you have to go, okay, but where's the data to back that up? Thriving in a crisis means that you have to look to the future. You have to say, what's my plan? In my opinion, what's my plan? And then what do I do? What do I have in my toolkit? And what resources do I have? And what data do I have to show me, okay, this person has done it this way, this other person has done it this way. I can triangulate to see I can actually execute and make that goal.
So, Khalil, I know on the question of access to capital, that is a recurring concern among businesses, especially small businesses and startup businesses, access to capital, whether from commercial credit institutions or from venture capital angel investments. What has been your experience so far with that capitalization?
Sure. So I'm going to make a joke. Let me just preface it. So my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All right? Anybody knows that? Right? No small loan, nothing like that. We've had a very challenging, bumpy ride to get here. We've had great people supporting us, though. We've had great advisors, people that showed us, and you have to be smart with it. You have to think about ways outside of just going to necessarily friends and family. Think about how you go to people that are interested in helping you to solve the problem. So one of my very close friends in a group or law firm helped us to put together a convertible debt note, which most people go, what? What is a convertible? It's a note that essentially you can get, it is like a loan. So if the person chooses to convert that to shares in your business at some future point, then they can do that, or they can be repaid that loan. That's not a typical structure that people here, talk about in Barbados, but it's something that's available to you. From a funding standpoint, so fund access, if you don't mind, I'm just going to call the names. Fund Access, BIDC, and other groups, they have fantastic programs in place for people who are doing, somebody that wants to cut lawns, and they can go and buy an asset that they can then say, okay, if it doesn't work out, I can go and repossess that asset. Sorry, what?
And the guarantors.
Yes, and repossess from the guarantors as well, which is very difficult. We need to move into a space where we're not just betting on one horse, because, for the life of me, I don't know anybody in the world that picks all winners. Nobody picks all winners, but in Barbados, we seem to want to pick all winners. We need to have a portfolio. We need to have a portfolio of startups. We need to have a portfolio of medium-sized companies. We need to have a portfolio of large companies. And then you start seeing investment growth, because some companies are going to fail and some companies are going to grow. What we've experienced is that the company, the group that has actually given us money, and I want to say that is they say this out loud for anybody that's interested and may need access to not a large amount of money, $20,000, was the Barbados Public Workers Credit Union. They said, we want to give people money. They have shown that they want to give people money, and you do things in the entrepreneurship space that you wouldn't typically do in a business. So Tom's not going to go out and take a large loan of $10 million on his own name. But when you're starting a business and you need funds, you will take a $20,000 loan on your own name and know that you have to pay it back and that you're liable for it, because you want to see the business succeed. And that's what we've done. We've gone out there and taken it in our own name and raised money from friends, from family, and then from interested people that have seen, okay, this, so I should just step back one second and say, our overall business is that we are in transportation technology. And the reason that we chose transportation technology is because transportation will never go away. You will always need to move people, you will always need to move goods, you will always need to move things from one point to another. So we saw it as one of those recession-proof industries, like alcohol. Right. So it's one of those areas that we thought, once you can create a solution in this area, you will always have an opportunity. And somebody else may come in and take your, I don't want to say eat your lunch, but I'm going to use the example of Uber. People say, well, what happened with Uber? We open the paper one day and the minister says, we are so happy to be welcoming Uber to Barbados. And we sit there going, we've been here for 2 years, hi. And that is one of those very direct challenges. But it's not to say that we actually say it'd be great. People now will start thinking about ride sharing. It will expand the market. People that didn't necessarily take cabs will start to take cabs. People that always needed to get on a ZR or get in their car will now start looking at different modes of transport. What I think it will actually do is that drink driving law that we've been pushing for so long will actually come into effect. Every challenge is almost always an opportunity. And I'm going to just say another kind of an example. If one doctor goes and has a patient, he's not going to be annoyed that another doctor came and helped cure his patient, right? He just goes and looks for another patient to go and work on. And that's essentially how I think about, say, thriving in a crisis. If one problem gets solved, well, we know that there's no shortage of problems in Barbados. So we can go and solve another problem.
So I'm coming back to you still, Khalil, because I need to have a little bit more of a discussion on this entrepreneurship drive. So I know you've gone to several of the demo treks, at least one of them I'm familiar with, and you've seen what startups from other jurisdictions look like. There has been a tremendous drive in many countries that has been driven by these startup companies pushing entrepreneurship, new innovations, new enterprises being created, and they have been attracting inward flows of investment into those economies as a result. What recommendations would you have for Barbados using entrepreneurship to attract additional types of investment into Barbados, into new sectors that we haven't considered before?
Thank you. So I just recently came back from TechCrunch Disrupt, which is one of the foremost tech conferences in the world. And I was actually invited to go there. We didn't have the money to pay for it ourselves, and we were invited to go there because somebody wanted to show what tech is being done in the Caribbean. Most people said, oh, well, the Caribbean's really nice for beaches and sunsea and sand and, Mai Tais. But nobody thought of it as being a jurisdiction where you can actually do tech and have, startups in many, many different areas. What we have seen is that, one, we need enabling policies. We need policies that say to startups, okay, you don't need to conform to the same regulations as a traditional business that's making $5 million, $10 million a year. You have a different group of rules that you can fall under. I think we also need to, from the angel community, from the group of people that do need to invest, they also need to see that there is opportunity and that it can't just be, once again, picking winners. But then I'm going to go on the entrepreneur side. You can't expect to get money if you don't have the knowledge about the product that you're going to sell. I've met, and I'm going to focus on tech because we are in tech. I've met tech entrepreneurs that I ask, so what language are you coding in? And I am not a coder by any stretch of the imagination, but I at least know a few things to know if the conversation is correct. And they said, oh, we're C++. C++ is the 96 Corolla as opposed to having at least a 2015 Corolla. You need to be able to talk the talk in your particular industry because that's how you attract the investor who has confidence that you know more about this product than anybody else because you sit day and night researching it. So it needs to be not just the, we need more money, we need more money. We need more entrepreneurs to get out there and say, we know the information, we know what we're talking about. But then I also want to say that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are just not getting the time of day and often having to revert to go back to, working in a bank. There's nothing wrong with working in a bank. There are many, many great banks. Many, many great banks out there. But they don't get to realize their dreams because they have to fulfill a need. They have to feed themselves. We need to have the opportunity we need to have a small fund that gives people a find and go see $1,000 and then a group of maybe $10,000 or $20,000 to be able to start and launch that business where there is some structure. But then the entrepreneur needs to realize, I can't then go and take a nice salary and go and pay myself $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. You need to be hungry. You need to starve for a little bit and go out there and get your customers. So it needs to be a number. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalil. That sets us up nicely for where we're going next with Jeremy, because we have been talking a lot about trying to ensure that we have a new perspective on the international business sector. Typically, when we talk about this in the public space, it is about the financial services sector, the banking sector, and so on. And we do, of course, have some legal services which are there. But when you look at the investment reports and international business studies which have been done by the international organizations and even the EY attractiveness indices and so on, we see a range of sectors that have not been explored. And this is the reason why the conversation with a person like Khalil in tech entrepreneurship is an important one in the context of this discussion as we figure out strategies to thrive in the midst of crisis and identify new sectors. Jeremy, what are some of the things that at a sectoral level we should be doing to support the development of international business in its most expanded form given where we are now?
Honestly, this is where you love your mind, You saw exactly where it was ready to chomp at the bits. Because it's so interesting with the direction Khalil went in. The topic at hand is thriving in a crisis. And believe you me, yes, you all as international business people and local people are in crisis, which requires, again, as Khalil said, when you're hungry, look for other places. By a show of hands, how many of you have traveled to Silicon Valley to pick up business in the last year? Jeez, oh, Brad, you mean all this money outside of trying to sell services or find investment? There's a double taxation treaty with the United States of America that somehow allows you to go for all those guys in Silicon Valley, spending enormous sums in San Francisco, you know how expensive that real estate is, and to reposition them in a country like this so that they can export services and tax revenue is like crazy. All right, I know I'm not speaking economics right now, but I need to be like Donald Trump to get this aside. It's crazy. A good example, Apple, world's largest company. You guys today saw in class how big it was, right? How much was the market cap again? Jonathan, tell me quick. $868 billion. That's the class I taught just before this, all right? Now, good. So, no, yeah, he gets credit, right? So understand how big this thing is. It could buy over Barbados 220 times over, easily. Buy over this economy, easily. Pay off debts, everything, easily. Let me show you a scene. The European Court of Justice fined Apple at 60-something million, $69 million last year over anti-competitive practices. Apple's headquarters in Europe is in Ireland. They are considering right now moving from Ireland. They can, through Ireland, normally they funnel like what? Out of the 68 billion they have in cash, there's 100 billion under management plus. So roughly, let's say $60 billion passes through Ireland on an annual basis to be invested. Let's put it that way. I found it interesting, and I know the reps aren't here, and I've said this to them before, that Invest Barbados was not flaring up there, trying to convince Apple to move an administrative office into Barbados. Up to now, I do not understand why nobody's going after that business. I do not understand why nobody's going after Tesla's business. I do not understand why nobody's going after none of those businesses, especially, and I said this in the panel discussion last year, oil businesses are looking to set up in Guyana. 5 oil fields, you know. You know it's 5 oil fields of business? Close to 106, no, right? Yeah, over $100 billion of business that could effectively replace what you're doing right now. So what I'm saying is that every crisis is just looking at the glass half empty. There's so much opportunity out there. You can start with Silicon Valley. With respect to tourism, let's call it a dichotomy, where it can also positively affect tourism. I remember arguing, is the correct word, with a particular minister as I end this, that I am appalled that the the Ministry of Tourism or all the statutory corporations connected with tourism, you know, the BT, MI and whatnot, were not actively in either Vancouver, Canada, or in Silicon Valley, or San Francisco more particularly, literally marketing to Chinese. And a bit of a side note, and students don't tease me about this, my first real relationship was with a Chinese woman. And one thing I learned is the importance of marketing through family. So if you want Chinese to come and spend their money, because mind you, Jamaica realized in 2004 that Chinese were going to travel wherever once they could spend money. You guys know this, right? That Chinese don't care how far it is they're coming. Once there's facilities made for them, all right? And Jamaica's tourism sector outside of St. Lucia's, the only ones that are benefiting from that train of thought. No, still, 13 years later. And I argued with him, the cheapest way, because if the Hong Kong office had to be shut, if the Beijing office for Invest Barbados or whomever had to be shut, all you had to do was to market to people in Vancouver and in Silicon Valley, and that would have gotten their parents for the millions of dollars over to Barbados. So not only are you setting up businesses, but you have a very strong foundation that can also benefit you from tourism. We can go through all different types of commodities and whatnot, but as I'm saying, or if I can end on this appeal, I don't know if Lisa wishes to ask or somebody would ask another question, but really the crisis is with our political leaders, not with you. Don't let it continue to be with you. The world is too big. Even in Dominica right now, where I came back from, there's tons of opportunity for them. Tons. Scarrett is finding money all in Abu Dhabi. The same money that we ran from as a country, huh? Same money we ran from as a country is going to rebuild a CARICOM neighbor. All right? And I'm saying there's other ways, there's other means, there's opportunity out there. And I could go on and on.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question for Jeremy, and I would like Tom as well to weigh in. So in the Caribbean, we have been seeing decreased flows in business coming in some instances, but we have been seeing at least 2 of our regional partners thriving. in the midst of crisis. One of those partners, when I was doing some research in preparation for tonight, is Jamaica. Jeremy just mentioned Jamaica. Jamaica has seen a massive increase in both investment flows and a number of businesses obviously domiciled there. What has been the magic about what Jamaica has done? I mean, given that historically Barbadians, we have always talked about the experience of Jamaica and the challenges there, and here we are now making reference to what Jamaica is doing right. Tom and Jeremy, can you weigh in a little bit on what you've been seeing coming out of Jamaica? A lot of that investment is driven by the logistics hub. So just weigh in for me a little bit
I'll
on
be
that,
real
please.
short. What's the other partner?
Bahamas.
All right, well, Bahamas is an interesting story, but Jamaica, all right, so Jamaica is a case of them actually finally learning from their own experience. Honest to God, if you've been going through hell for 30 years, you got to learn something eventually. But no, on a serious front, it came down to political leaders actually making the right hard decisions. So for instance, we're back in 2012, they did a debt restructuring sometime in early 2000s. That would have not made any sense back then because the appetite for restructuring at the time was not smart. They needed the breathing room. In 2012, when interest rates reached their historical lows, any smart country would have restructured at the time, which was bothering me that we weren't even considering it at the time. We thought we were better than we were. So Jamaica's credit rating was, yes, dead short. It was doing the right things in terms of timing with respect to fiscal policy, cutting the right places, working on productivity measures. Those of you that love accountability and whatnot and anti-corruption measures would know that they had the procurement offices set up that allowed for a careful tracking of how funds were being spent in government. There's too much leakage in Caribbean countries and Jamaica, and ironically, Guyana is getting their act together. But on top of that, they made the hard decision of should we tell investors the bad news now, where it is easier to tell investors the bad news. So it was bad news because investors would have lost. Most people would have lost there and then. Jamaicans paid with their currency being depreciated even further. However, what it did was to bring a lot of breathing room to government. It cut down how much they were paying out on a monthly basis. It allowed them to redirect social spending. It allowed them to enter into new programs. Julian Robinson, I used to call him the young minister of technology. He definitely started to do some stuff like cutting telephone bills. There's voice over IP within the Jamaican government. They don't really use anything over the line, blah, blah, blah. The point is they went through major innovation as a country from the government level, and then they realized that they could redirect some resources to the private sector. On top of that, there just seemed to be this booming appetite for investing in Jamaica. The Jamaica Stock Exchange between 2011 and last year was one of the highest grossing stock exchanges in the world in terms of return, highest returning one. Last year or 2 years ago, it was around 20%. You know, you invested in, on average across the index, you would have made 20% in Jamaica last year, or year before. So you had a couple of things that just made sense. People were willing to invest, which we don't do locally, else Cali will not be running on just a month of cash flow. You know, it's a good business, or good businesses. But the point being is that an investment attitude as opposed to savings, because Barbados is liquid as ever. And I had a conversation with an economist today that told me, well, look, it's liquid as ever, but the cash ain't moving nowhere. That is a problem. We could effectively help prop up our own country, but all of you, yes, all of you, got too much money in the bank right now, including busy. So, but no, all sport aside, that is the issue. Government cannot invest. We need to find somebody that could pick up the slack. Government has to take certain risks, but we are a bit far gone. Jamaica was, let's say the timing was right, and they were fortunate, and that's my view on that.
From a firm level, Tom, what do you have to say?
We don't deal too much in Jamaica at the moment, but and Bahamas, we've got a team up there for Williams Solar, doing a big installation there. I don't know, both these islands have a hard currency or a hardish currency, a tradable currency. They've got a state, Jamaica seems to have a state that has gone through so much pain. It has now entered a paradigm where it's actually willing to A, ask for help, B, realize it's in a problem, and C, give itself enough space to make plausible changes to the economy, which are then, as I understand it, audited or checked by a body from the public and private sector to check those changes are being held to. The market's like that. Capital likes that. Capital likes to see changes, improvements over time. It doesn't need to all be immediate. I remember the IMF saying in the 2014 report about the reporting timeliness of our public enterprises here. That's something that people need to see. It needs to be an improvement. It doesn't need to be done, audited overnight. It just needs to be improved. So transparency, rule of law, a corporate law court with teeth, something that gives investors belief that property rights will be protected, that there's going to be gradual improvements over time. I feel that's what investors are looking for. I mentioned one other island. I went up on a work trip for the new Regis business we have here in Barbados and now in Trinidad. Went up to meet the boss of Regis in St. Bart's this spring. And as we flew through St. Martin Airport, Busy and I checked that we could both count, and we could count. We both counted 62 private jets sitting on the tarmac at St. Martin. And then Busy mentioned his brother used to trade vegetables literally out of the plane, out of that airport, 25, 30 years ago. So you could ask yourself about that. What makes them different? And I'm going to come back again. They seem to have a hard currency. They have a tradable currency. I don't know too much more about St. Martin, but they must be doing something that makes international business feel comfortable going through that. So if Barbados can move in that way, that would be a great thing.
Well, I see that the Director of International Business is here, so I'm not even going to look back at him. But this question, the response to this question is for him. What are some of the impediments to businesses doing business in Barbados? So people say you can turn around a business in Cayman, you can turn around a business in Jamaica in a flash, but attempting to do so in Barbados is like pulling teeth. Let's talk a little bit about that for the benefit of the director whose name I haven't called. Hi, Kev.
Sorry, if I may just actually offer another, this is going to just tap back to the last point. I think we also need an evangelist. You need a couple of success stories coming out of the jurisdiction. So Barbados, we have this young guy, Gabriel Abed, who's going around telling people about BIT, just raised some good money, and people are now seeing that these things are happening. In Jamaica, there's a young guy by the name of Kirk Hamilton, yes, and he has brought a number of...
Summit.
Yep, so the two major companies that he has are Tech Beach, which is a tech summit, and then the My Destination Experience. Mm-hmm. My Destination Experience brings people to the jurisdiction and tells them, look guys, all of this is happening. It's not necessarily in tech, it's across the industries, whether it's construction, whether it's in fabrication, and then of course in tech. He then has this other one, which is for the younger tech people to say, hey guys, connect with these high net worth individuals. And he was joking around. He said, when he was in the Kingston airport, there were something like 15 private jets flying in for his event. Yep. So you need an evangelist. And then that ties into the second part of it, which is going to these conferences is great, but you need to make it sticky. You have to have a place where people can go and learn and grow and just be immersed in it. And so we need a space. We need a Regis. We need a co-working space, something similar where people can sit there and go, all right, now that I've taken in all this knowledge, who are the people that I'm actually going to work with? Because often you leave the conference, you're charged up, and then everybody goes their own separate direction, and there's no cohesion.
And those 15 jets at Norman Manley International are replicated by multiple degrees at Sangster, because a lot of that activity is happening out of Montego Bay. Right. So to the question of doing business in Barbados, to round this discussion up, how nightmarish is it? Is it going to the dentist without anesthesia, Kevin? Don't all talk at once, because we know there's a lot to talk about.
Sorry, go ahead.
We only have a few more minutes before we have to open up to the audience for questions, but in order for us to be able to compete with these jurisdictions, how do we address the question of regulatory reform and making doing business in Barbados far easier? Very quickly.
I can see the boss with his hand in the air. For the first time, I'm going to ignore him. I'm going to go myself. It's tough to do business when the landscape changes radically. This last budget was a shock to me, shock to everyone, I think. It makes it very, very hard to trade in those circumstances. You get not only the increased cost, I'm not saying whether it's required or not, but just trading in these environments is very, very difficult. It's also the principle that you can change something so radically without warning. That makes people nervous. I'm going to be more nervous going into the next budget. I'm going to be nervous before that budget. I'm going to make sure we've got more buffers in our current assets. If there's a problem, it slows everything down. It makes more risk. So the operating environment in Barbados is getting harder. There's still some fantastic things about Barbadian business. That's why I am here. I feel there's a chance that this could become what we hope it would be, which is the place to do business in the Caribbean or in Latin America. There's so many fundamentally strong parts of Barbados, the fantastic education, the rule of law, processes generally followed. There's a high degree of talent here, but it's not easy doing business.
Jeremy, rounding out, and then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience.
Got 0 minutes, so just very simply, bro, you got a lot of things to do up in there, man. A lot of things to do up in there. All right. Once there's a will, there's a way, especially if it lasts an administration or survives one. So the thing is that we all know what needs to be done. The World Economic Forum has listed areas we are weak in. There's measurable amounts of data around to show Barbados where we need to go. The only issue has been, and Cal, you spoke to it while even saying it, it's a cultural problem. It really begins and ends with the fact that somehow it's the same thinking like God is a Bajan when it comes to hurricane. Not to go over the Dominica thing too much, but end on this. People thought up to landfall that it was a category 3, so they did not take the right precautions. I was one of them. People thought it would have been not as much or as powerful as it would have been, but then when it was hitting you and you heard the wind sounding like God was belching, all right? When you heard that, it became a different story and it was too late to act. The problem is our culture and not having a sense of urgency. We're not born into it. I had to bribe my students of 5% to get them here instead of them understanding the benefits of being in a room with people like this. Not to put shade on the students, but it's just to understand there's a lack of urgency. So all the things you need to do, you know already. You know. It's what we need to do as a culture to enforce that they do their job, which is settled at the polls, and number 2, to execute. That's all.
All right, so we have to open up the floor for questions. So we have a number of things that are on our table. We've already talked about the challenges of doing business. That's the last point that we talked about. And of course, we've talked so many times about the regulatory environment that needs to be reformed. We talk about the firm level experience, the macro level experience, the challenges at the macroeconomic level and the policy interactions, policy required interventions that are required. And of course, we've had an all-important discussion about currencies. What are some of your issues? What are some of the things that you would want to bring to the table coming out of this discussion on crisis, but most importantly, not just crisis, but thriving in it? Busy. There's a mic in the center, so please step right up.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
The biggest problem with getting out of a crisis is to know what caused it and why you're in it, in my opinion, and to understand the fundamentals. I would like to ask Jeremy a simple question. Jeremy, do you know if, for example, every holder of an EC dollar wanted to convert it to US dollars, would there be enough US dollars in the central bank in St. Kitts?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I think what Tom was suggesting, which nobody understood, is that the EC dollar is 100% covered by US reserves. What is the Barbados dollar covered by?
So you answered your own question.
No, I just want you to tell me. I don't
Yes,
know.
for every dollar as of June, and I know there's some central bankers in the room, so raise your hand if you're off, right? As of June, you see them in the back. For every dollar US stored at the central bank, which is less than those stored in the banking sector. This is the next part. The problem that we got in this country, we only focus on the reserves here. There's 7 Barbados dollars in circulation for every dollar US stored here, in a sense. There is, however, for every, because it's what, 300 million US, right? Or it's 300 million US, right? Easy, but just put your hand in your free rate. It's about 300, as at June, right? Yeah, 300. So 300 million US, check it, busy, wait. 300 million US local, that's 600 million Barbados stored in here. The commercial banks had, as at July 2016, had around 1.3 billion Barbados dollars worth of foreign currency. So that's 3 plus 6, so 900. That brings it down to just around 5. So every US dollar that you've got stored, there's $5 billion in circulation. 4 to 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is one of the fundamental problems that we're facing. If an investor comes to Barbados, he wants to know if he invests his money here, that he's going to be guaranteed that he can take his profit, if he makes a profit, out. It's a risk. Right now we can't be, we are up, as far as I know, it has never happened. But when you hear these numbers, sensible investors are gun shy. Then they really got to have a lot of faith and a lot of love for Barbados
Capital
to
is
come
logical,
here.
right?
Next thing, next problem is this. Every single day in Barbados we hear about new regulations. We are into regulating everything. We are into making it as difficult as possible to do any transactions in Barbados. And wow, there you go. And I know to have a lot of accountants in this room that will probably lynch me. But they are largely responsible. And I know that they're working for the international community and so on, right? But today, if you sneeze in the office, you can have a director's resolution to approve that you could sneeze. It is ridiculous the way it is going. It has taken us, I don't know how, months, literally months, to just get our annual report done because of all these regulations. Up to the day we were in a meeting, and I was told that we have to have a resolution in order to what it was now, to sell more fish or something, because we got a little fish farm investment, right? But the corporate secretary insisted, who is a lawyer, that we have to have a director's resolution to deal with this thing. In the old days, I would just go ahead and do it. You just write a check and pay the bill. Now we have to have a director's resolution. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. You can wait. We had Ben had bought some land at Huddersfield Turning. And we wanted to build a center for the construction industry to go and shop. So we wanted to put H&B Hardware and Williams equipment rentals and all those things in there, plus a lot of small businesses as well, and so on. We put in a planning application. It was in it for about 3 years, and every time we were told that we can't wash any vehicles in there because it's zone 2. We had a part of the land was over zone 1. So I said, all right, we will concrete over that land so nothing can seep into zone 1. You know what we were told? You can't do any construction work over zone 1. You have to leave it so. So people could come and park the car with leaking oil on the grass and leak straight into zone 1, when all he was trying to do is to stop it from going into zone 1 by concrete in place. Illogical stuff, regulations. People that have never invested 1 cent in a business, telling you, you can't do. That's the problem with Barbados. So if you want to get out of a crisis, get rid of some of them regulations.
Now, I like the end premise at set. I'm willing to disagree on 2 fundamentals, but let me point back to something Busy said earlier, which was rather interesting. the whole issue of convertibility. It's something that a lot of economists, excuse me, from outside of the Caribbean have always argued that Barbados should be. The only problem is that the economy here is a little different to the economy in the OECS. A couple of factors ensue. There's over 1 million people, and most of them carry a current account surplus. In other words, they export way more than they import. The problem we made for ourselves a long time ago was having tourism as being the #1 industry in this country, and I say so without apology. And here's why. Tourism is a greater deterioration or deterrent to current account surpluses than any other business you've got, hands down, all right? So on that ground, if you fundamentally are going to keep a tourism industry, which is #1, very seasonal, #2, it's highly linked to the level of imports that you've got. There's academic research in mobile tons that proves that to you. And also the fact that the second leading industry, let's not consider international business for a moment. In terms of contribution to economic activity, well, main one is retail. You've got a situation where convertibility would kill this country overnight. So this is the reason why since the 1970s, this is nothing recent, that the Barbados dollar was not highly convertible. It was a double-edged sword. It meant to protect us, but now it is stifling us. It means in order to address the issue of convertibility, you've got two plans, and I've said this emphatically. You either really depend on international business, A, or B, make it easier for certain flagship companies to go out and invest. Else, they will continue to have politicians that say that the Barbados dollar is not tradable outside of Barbados and be half right. I mean Senator Ince, right? And be half right, all right? So the point being then, he did say it was a public thing. Can't sue me for that. So, but on the other issue of, what was the second point that basically did again? Regulations. I emphatically do not agree. There's no place on earth more heavily regulated than Singapore. The problem is attitude. When you have somebody who can hide behind regulations and say, well, come back tomorrow, you know, then you got a problem. The issue isn't the regulations, you know. There's nowhere more heavily regulated on planet Earth than Singapore, from chewing gum on the streets. I actually like to play around. When I went to Singapore last year, I ate ice cream on the streets just to see if somebody would do something to me, right? But I'm trying to tell you is there's nowhere more heavily regulated, but yet the country works. Why? Because people are efficient. It comes down to people. So if you got a problem with town and country planning, then the problem is the town and country planner and not the laws. It is not the laws. Our laws make us attractive. That's why this industry started, because you had strong regulatory platforms to build upon. There was no industry in this country better set up, that was set up because of strong regulations that enforce a very strong sense of governance relative to our neighbors and other things.
We have another question from the audience. Please, can you introduce yourself
Hello,
briefly?
good night. I'm Carolyn Edwards. Well, I just want to share my experience a bit, right? Well, it has been here, it has been interesting and really motivated listening to these guys. I was here last year as well too. But listen to you all, brought an interesting closure to my experience. Well, there has been like just over a year now that I wasn't working, but I have been in contact with some person outside. And that person was just showing me, well, to come from within myself and expand my horizons. And it had taught me an interesting lesson that the sky is the limit. And as I just reach from opportunity to opportunity, sometimes when I feel, well, when I get a bit too comfortable with one opportunity, it's gone, then another opportunity is here. And that person has taught me, don't worry, Carolyn, you just come up, you don't stand down. And just to reach from opportunity to opportunity, and it had brought me out of a really terrible situation. Because when at first I wasn't working, everything seemed so dark and hopeless. But it has been a wonderful experience. But listening to y'all guys helped me understand my situations more. Thanks a lot. It has been nice being here.
Thank you. Ian, I see you're heading to, okay, before, well, you can go.
Lisa,
go
may I offer a
closer.
comment?
Hang on. We'll get some more feedback and then we'll come in.
Hi, good. Oh, you go ahead first. Go ahead.
Well, you were
No,
already on
somebody
the mic.
wanted to say something first. Okay. 3 quick comments. One is for entrepreneurs, which is the fact that PayPal now has shortened everything down to a link. You do not register as a business. You have to wait 30 days. If you register PayPal, you do it as a personal entity. Okay. All right. Well, that's a new one for me. The other thing is, in terms of what we're speaking about here tonight, I know for a fact that in the Dominican Republic, these are second of 3 quick comments. In the Dominican Republic, it was 43 business days to create a company. They've now narrowed it down to 9, and their Minister of Commerce apologized for that length because in his view, it should be only 3 days. My final thing, which is actually to agree with Mr. Williams, I'm going to give the deep, dark secret of the creation of BajanReporter.com, which was I had to use my wife's grandmother's funeral to get the capital. All right, RBTT was offering a soft, unsecured loan at the time, and I told them that I wanted to clear my driver's license, I wanted to clear a washing machine, and I wanted to get a new computer desktop, etc. And they said, well, what's that little bit there? And I said, well, that's in case I've underestimated expenses and I need a shortfall. They said, no problem. That was really the seed money to get my website created, because when I was starting to do the website, I was told I'd need this kind of feasibility study, I'd need this and that and the next and the fourth and the fifth. And I said, well, I said something, but not for here. And when I got the money, they said, all right, we've given you checks for the various things that you said you wanted, you know, the licenses, driver's license and the computer, etc. But the balance is being put into your account. I drew on that money right away, went to the father of the webmaster who was in Canada at that point, and I said, start building. I had already done my research. I knew I didn't want Joomla. I wanted WordPress because that is more secure against hacking attempts. I told the bank that I wanted to contribute towards my wife's grandmother's funeral to get the ball rolling. That is what I had to do to get around feasibility studies and so forth. So I do tend to agree with Mr. Williams about trying to get some stuff done in Barbados. You have to come up with ways to get around the system.
Don't. Thank you very much. Next commenter, please.
Hi, good evening.
We have
all.
5 minutes, so I'm going to ask you if everyone who is trying to speak, can you just make your comments very concise and get to the point without a lot of the additional narrative so we can get through the discussion on time.
Hi, good night. I actually have a question, so I can get some more value from the team you've put together.
Absolutely.
I got a couple points tonight. One was a good brand attracts capital, and I think that's very important. I was in this game long before entrepreneurship was sexy, or even the word was coined around here. And kudos to Khalil for taking up that mantle and running real hard and got better and so on. But my question is, I've seen progressing over the years that every solution seems to revolve around politics and government. Can you guys articulate solutions that do not need government's involvement? And I think the reason I ask this is because personally, I don't think we can afford to wait on explaining how the future is going to work for people who really fundamentally cannot understand it. I don't think they're doing something bad. I think they cannot understand what the future looks like we can. So if you could share any knowledge like that.
If I can just ask if we can get all of the questions all at once, and then we'll respond at the same time. Dwayne, why am I not surprised to see you? Welcome.
All right. The question really relates to, we've heard in the press, certain ministers saying and lamenting that businesses don't look outwards. But how does that impact when we have a currency issue? That you can't get money to look outwards. And this is really more to Mr. Tom Hall. And then just one last comment. I was shocked when I looked around the room and Jeremy made the comment that the Minister of Finance was doing the right thing at the wrong time. Because I don't imagine why nobody doesn't know that, because this has been occurring since 2010. And that's when we should have taken the hard decision, the castor oil instead of surgery. What he did is facilitate our excess, which goes to Mr. Williams's currency conversion, because had we done that then, and we took the castor oil, we would not have surgery here now, we would not have the currency conversion rates that we have currently.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Good night. My question is more directed towards Mr. Brian and Mr. Stephen. In terms of technology companies here in the island, as culture dictates, we are very slow to accept new. And the thing we've been slowest to accept is technology. So my question is two things, because I believe a pessimist is actually two things away from being an optimist most times. They need hope and they need information. And in some cases, hopeful information. So for persons who are looking to get into, whether it be in technology towards engineering, or in your case, Mr. Stephen, financial technology, what would be the hope and the information we should be looking for?
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I'm going to open back up for the panel to respond, starting first with Khalil. I know you wanted to jump in early, and then we move across to Tom, Jeremy, and then we'll wrap up with our final statements.
So there's a really good book that I read a number of years ago, and it's a provocative title intentionally, called Why Nations Fail. And essentially it talks about two things, just really two core pillars. One is inclusive policies, and one is extractive policies. So if we think about what the Spanish did when they came to the New World, they just got things and they tried to take as much as they could. And if you now look at Latin America, it's very much built on that extraction. Whereas other places so the English went to America, and then they couldn't just extract everything, they had to work there, because the Indians heard from the other Indians, or the Native Americans heard from the other Native Americans, that these people are coming, and so they actually had to work, and they had to build a culture of performance. So this ties back to what is it that you can do without government? Almost everything, almost everything. You can get out there, you can register a business, it takes a bit long, it's a bit frustrating, but you can get it done. You can get a business name, and you can start trading tomorrow. There's nothing for you to say, today I registered KB Enterprises, and tomorrow I can't go out and say, hey, just write the check in a week for KB Enterprises. From an adoption standpoint, there is always a growth curve. Everybody talks about that hockey stick. And you do need to be mindful that is going to be a part of your business. You probably need some finances to be able to sustain it, or you need to move back home, or you need to make cuts. There are things that you need to do. Once again, going back to the optimistic place, the world is changing under our feet daily. I look at what's happening with cryptocurrencies. I look at what's happening with food. There's a company that's now going to be able to take an acre of land and be able to feed, instead of 2 people for a year, 700 people a year. Things are changing so rapidly, and the sphere is now, okay, well, what can I do in this space? And if you just literally hop online, go onto Google, you will see, how do I reach this market? If I get into that market with social media, everything is so much cheaper. Now we have the opportunity to do day in, day out, make money online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The adoption does not necessarily need to be Barbados, and I understand with physical industries it does, but we have the opportunity to sell now more than ever outside of our shores.
Thank you, Khalil. Tom?
My answer to the first, what one thing could we all do, and it echoes, I think we've got one thing we all agree on here, is urgency, a sense of urgency to your work, to our work. We have that at Williams Industries mainly. I think we could all do more. There's a quote I want to give you, and it was the founder, there's a guy called Joseph Cyril Bamford. He was the founder of JCB, the Yellow Digger Company, right? So he was once asked what it took to succeed. And he said it's the same thing it took to get started, a sense of urgency about getting things done. The people who make things move in this world share this same sense of urgency. No matter how intelligent or able you may be, if you don't have this sense of urgency, now is the time to start developing it. The world is full of very competent people who honestly intend to do things tomorrow, or as soon as they can get around to it. Their accomplishments, however, seldom match those of the less talented, who are blessed with a sense of importance of getting started now. I think there's a huge amount to be said for that. Sometimes I've worked with lots of people here who spin things back to me on email as if, like that. There's several people in this room. You can actually, if you move in cycles of seconds or minutes, or hours is fine, but if you can do that, you can get stuff done. You can actually get stuff done really fast. And if there's one thing that we could all do a bit more is have a look at how urgently we're attending to our task. Second part was to Dwayne, your first half of your question. I think you said, is Williams Industries unable to get access to funding? Is that about? With great difficulty, but we're trying. We are succeeding in parts. It's very, very difficult, and I hope that eases soon. If it does ease, then we'll be investing more abroad, and that won't be taking away from local investment. It's a different investor pool. So if that's eased, that will help Barbadian. It doesn't need to be, I disagree with Jeremy, I don't believe it needs to be champions, Williams Industries, or it should be any brain with access to, any bright brain with access to capital should be allowed to go out. It shouldn't require a banking relationship. Thanks.
Our last comments from you, Jeremy?
Thank you all for coming out. But no, let me just address Anton, although Khalil did pay some mind to it, and also because I wouldn't want to give away free marks, address Jonathan very quickly. Actually, let me do that first. There's a reason why I'm forcing most of you to learn Python this semester. I'm forcing them to learn Python. You see how Khalil was talking about C++ and other dead languages and whatnot? The main thing is about creating a culture of people, younger people that understand that this world is adaptable. When I was in their position, it was VBA that the finance people were using, and apparently some banks still force people to use VBA. Well, the world has gone ahead, and they're moving into Python, and they're moving into Ruby, and some other nice languages that I forced upon myself to learn with urgency over the last 10 years. I forced myself to do it, all right? And I am imparting that knowledge on the generation whom I hope would add value to your organizations. And the thing is that as a culture, we have to recognize that this world does not need us. We are 300,000 people, and to this day, people still don't recognize that Rihanna is Barbadian. She's Bajan-born superstar, US-based superstar. If you get where I'm coming from, we don't matter. As a region, we don't matter except if we can add value at the level of the UN. Honest to God, that's what most of our funding is all about, okay? If we can add value when it comes to votes. We are not significant, but we can be, which is different to how we've thought before. So with respect then to doing things that can, let's say, propel us going forward without government, you can start today. Each and every one of you, young students, I encourage them to buy Bitcoin, believe it or not. I'm big into crypto. We didn't get into my research. That's fine yet. So, ending, each one of you could actually just afford to take a risk. It is so seamless and easy to do business in this world right now that yes, if even Barbados is keeping you behind, set up a company in Estonia, become an Estonian digital resident, and avoid all the pressures of Barbados, and then maybe politicians will listen, and then they'll realize that they need you more than you need them. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Khalil and to Tom and, of course, Jeremy, who is always very engaged and animated. So there are a couple of things that I just want to capture from our discussion. There are about 4 main points, and I think everything else can be captured as some sub-themes underneath us. The first thing is understanding the fundamentals of crisis. What constitutes a crisis? What are the factors that have gone into creating that crisis? And what needs to be done to respond to that crisis? The second question is the urgency. in making those decisions. And I feel as though we are still in the place since 2008, 2017, where we're still talking about urgency, but we're not actually doing it. So the urgency of decision making has long passed, and we're still talking about it. The need to do is upon us. We have to actually make some of those changes. The third thing that I captured from the discussion was that there's a need for us to look at sectoral diversification in the international business sector. Khalil introduced things like the tech possibilities for investment attraction. Jeremy identified a number of areas where we could be attracting new businesses to set up administrative offices in Barbados to take advantage of shifts in international regulatory changes and what has happened in places like Europe, including, of course, but not limited to, Brexit. So we see that we have to look at diversifying our base beyond what we've traditionally done. That leads us, of course, into a new investment attraction model. We have the role of the state here, represented, of course, by the Division of International Business, Invest Barbados, and, of course, multiple state agencies. What should be their role in supporting regulation versus over-regulation? So we have to have that discussion, because regulation isn't necessarily a bad thing, but overly regulating a sector is where the challenges come. So we have to be able to strike that balance. Have we done so? What changes need to be made? We need to have that conversation. And I think one last thing that Jeremy raised just now, which is the use of he didn't put it in that way, but I'm going to put it in that way. The use of our network of treaties. So we have treaties with a number of partners. We have treaties that we are negotiating, double taxation agreements, bilateral investment treaties. Who should be those priority partners? Where should we be looking to set up a bilateral regulatory relationship with new nations that we have not considered before, or to utilize those that have already been negotiated? So if it's difficult doing business in Barbados now, where should we be looking at doing business to attract investment into the country? I'm not necessarily advocating for the shifting of outward flows of investment that we should be attracting, but we are talking about using those double taxation treaties to our advantage. And then finally, I think we did have a discussion specifically about the use of our regional provisions, because we didn't have it directly, but we had it tangentially. So the CSME, we talked about the OECS. What should be our regional relationship in terms of investment attraction? I know that through CAIPA, we have a regional investment agency, and we're talking already about what our regional approach should be, what priority sectors we should be looking at. We need to expand that across the region, so we should be looking at some of those things. I think that pretty much sums up the broad thematic areas that have come out of our discussion under a couple of broad umbrellas. And I want to congratulate the Barbados International Business Association for consistently and aggressively being at the front of what I call the yes sector. Yes, we can do this. Yes, we can make changes. Yes, this is necessary. I'm putting you back into it and not taking no for an answer. I know what some of you have had to deal with that. So congratulations to all of you. And I'm looking forward to you being able to take some of these recommendations and possibly working on them in your respective subcommittees. So congratulations, and thank you all for coming out tonight. That the first way of perhaps first priority for attraction of investment should be air conditioning units to the central bank.
I know. Lisa, spot on. We'd like to apologize to everyone here for this heat. We're all sweltering. We've been working on this assiduously throughout the course of the event, but alas, to no avail. So again, we do apologize for that sincerely. Good evening, my name is Tara Frater. I'm a partner at Lex Caribbean Attorneys at Law, and I'm a director of BIBA and the chair of the Marketing and Communications Committee. When we were conceptualizing the theme for this event, we were determined not to wallow in despair, because it's very, very easy to do that in the current environment. And we thought it would be more constructive to seek to take a positive approach on what is undoubtedly a challenging economic environment. And so it was with this imperative in mind that we decided to facilitate this type of discussion. We had, of course, the current economic context outlined for us, although we are amply familiar with that in our daily lives, going to the supermarket, et cetera, et cetera. We learned about some of the difficulties of attracting investment capital for small, medium, and large enterprises in a context where capital is rational and our currency is effectively illiquid. But notwithstanding these difficulties, we see that there is always a way if one adopts the right mindset. Optimism is not a choice, it is a necessity. Every challenge is almost always an opportunity, if not least for sharpening your problem-solving skills. We see also that thriving in crisis requires making the right hard decisions at the right time and developing a sense of urgency about our mission. But importantly, we need to have the courage and confidence to be evangelists for ourselves and our unique value proposition in Barbados. International business is not just about doing what we can do here. It's about doing what we are well suited to do, given our size and our natural advantages. It truly has been an insightful exchange. Firstly, we'd like to thank our sponsor again, Brookfield International Bank, for without their generous sponsorship, this event would not be possible. Thank you very much. We would like to thank each of our panelists and our moderator for their contributions, and I'd like to invite Julia Taggart to assist me with this at the moment. Lisa, would you come and receive your gift, please? Yes. Jeremy? Tom? And Khalil. Thank you all for readily agreeing to participate and sharing your thoughts and insights. We really, really do appreciate it. We're also grateful to the BIBA Executive Director, Henderson Holmes, Mia Lisa Fenty-Garns, our BIBA Marketing Officer, Lisa Martin, our Executive Assistant, as well as the rest of the BIBA Secretariat for their stellar organization and work in making this event happen. Finally, we must thank you, the members of our audience who are here in person and virtually. I believe that we have 194 persons and counting joining us, so thank you virtually. Please do feel free to join us in the terrace upstairs for a mix and mingle, which will be happening right after this. And on your way out, you may purchase t-shirts for our fun walk run on Saturday. Thank you very much and good evening.